The galaxy had always been a place of endless politics, and delicate balanced civilizations rose and fell with the ebb and flow of time. Yet in the midst of all this, the smallest species, the humans, remained on the fringes, unimportant to the galaxy as a whole. Their homeworld, Earth, was considered little more than a footnote in the great annals of spacefaring history. But all that was about to change. A signal was detected far beyond known space, a pulse of energy so strong and so unique that it rattled the sensors of every major race and military fleet. The Council had always been able to manage threats from the outer rim, but this was different. At first, no one could make sense of the signal. It was an anomaly so unlike anything they had encountered before. The frequency was unlike any species' technology. Their sensors couldn't even pinpoint its exact source, only that it was coming from the edge of explored space, and it seemed to be directed at the heart of the galaxy, the home of the Galactic Council. The leaders of the galaxy's many civilizations gathered in their private chambers, debating the strange signal. Some dismissed it as nothing more than an errant message from a forgotten civilization, while others whispered that it could be a trap, something far worse. But even those who worried didn't see the humans as a serious threat. After all, their military might was non-existent compared to the vast fleets of the galactic powers. As the weeks passed, however, the signal continued its repeated pulse, and it began to grow stronger. The Council's defense systems monitored it carefully, but they could find no explanation for its power. It was as if it was mocking them, drawing attention to itself. Without saying anything directly, some factions in the Council began calling for a full investigation into the source of the signal, but others refused to believe it was worth the trouble. They considered it a trivial matter, until a report came in from the outer rim regions that would change everything. A series of small human colonies had been quietly destroyed. No warning, no message, no signs of a battle, just devastation. In the wake of the destruction was a strange new ship, unlike anything seen before, sleek, dark, and impossibly fast. Reports flooded in about this new vessel, the first to emerge from the remnants of humanity's forgotten space programs. The ship was more advanced than anything they had been able to produce on their own, and it seemed to be making its way toward the galactic core with terrifying efficiency. It had already torn through the defenses of the outer rim forces and left entire fleets in disarray without even engaging in combat. Its technology was beyond comprehension. No one could understand how humans had developed such a ship, let alone how they had hidden it for so long. The ship's movements were calculated and precise, as though it was being controlled by someone who knew exactly how to use it to its fullest potential. But the strangest part was the ship's silence. No communication, no threats, just a presence that seemed to defy the galaxy's rules of power. The Council's military forces scrambled to investigate, but their best fleets couldn't track the ship or even make sense of its technology. The humans had come out of nowhere, with a power that stunned everyone. The Council had always been able to ignore humanity as an insignificant player in the vast expanse of the galaxy, but now there was no mistaking it. Something had changed, something they could no longer ignore, and no one could say for certain what the outcome would be. The Council had always prided itself on its ability to maintain order across the galaxy. Its fleets were vast, and its intelligence networks unmatched. But now, the tide was shifting, and no one could predict where it would lead. As news of the mysterious human warship spread, panic began to ripple through the Council's ranks. The Council's brightest minds and military strategists were called into emergency meetings, yet none of them had any answers they could offer, only questions. How had humans built such a ship in secret? How had they hidden it for so long? And most importantly, why had they chosen now to reveal themselves? The humans had never been known for any kind of advanced military force. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards, and their reach was limited to their home system. Yet here they were with a warship that could easily challenge even the most advanced civilizations. The most unsettling revelation came when the Council learned that this ship was not a one-off creation, but part of something far larger. Intelligence reports began to trickle in, hinting at the existence of a fleet hidden within the farthest reaches of known space. The first whispers of these reports came from the outer rim, a place long ignored by most of the galaxy's elite species, where humans had apparently been developing and perfecting their military capabilities in isolation for centuries, all while keeping their existence under wraps. The idea of an entire fleet being assembled in secret was unthinkable, yet the evidence was undeniable. Several space stations and factories, thought abandoned, were found to be working in perfect order, with no records of their creation, or any trace of the personnel who had operated them. The humans had been planning for this moment for a long time, and they had done so without a single galactic power noticing. An emergency summit was called at the Council's homeworld to discuss the implications of this new revelation. The room was filled with representatives from every species in the Council, from the towering insectoids of Xyrath to the shape-shifting Litharians. None of them had an answer to the growing human threat. That Xyrath representative stood up first, his voice deep and resonant, shaking the chamber as he spoke. It was the first time in his long tenure that he had shown any form of emotion. "You're telling me we have let this primitive species develop in secret, and now they are a threat to us all?" His words cut through the room like a blade. A ripple of unease swept through the gathered leaders. The idea that humanity had slipped under the radar for so long seemed almost impossible, but the evidence spoke for itself. Meanwhile, human emissaries had sent messages to the Council. They demanded an audience with the highest leaders of the galaxy. The Council representatives were skeptical, but there was no denying the power of the human warship lurking in the edges of their homeworld's star system. The emissaries' message was blunt: "We come not as enemies, but as equals, and we demand recognition of our power and our place in the galaxy." The statement was delivered without flourish, no threats, no grand gestures, just a simple acknowledgement of the reality that humans were no longer the insignificant species the Council had always believed them to be. As the Council debated how to respond to this unprecedented demand, some of its members began to question whether it was time for a radical shift in their policies. Maybe it was time to reconsider humanity's place in the grand scheme of the galaxy. After all, this was no ordinary species. They were resourceful, cunning, and now armed with technology that made them a force to be reckoned with. The Council's unity began to fracture as some members began to see the humans as potential allies, while others saw them as a threat that had to be eliminated before they could rise any further. But one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. The Council's once unified front began to crumble under the weight of humanity's sudden rise. Alien representatives who had long dismissed the human species as insignificant now found themselves questioning everything they had known about the galaxy's power dynamics. The emissary's simple demand for recognition reverberated across the room, leaving silence in its wake. The human captain who had sent the message was unknown to them. No one knew his background or what kind of power he commanded, but it was clear that the human race had somehow turned the tables in a way no one had expected. Some Council members, particularly the more conservative factions, were outraged by the very idea of negotiating with a species they had long seen as beneath them. They dismissed the emissary's words as a bluff, but a growing sense of unease gripped them all. For days, the Council was consumed by frantic debate. Should they open diplomatic talks with this mysterious human emissary, or should they launch a preemptive strike to eliminate the threat? The military leaders, who had always held sway over the Council's decisions, were split. One faction argued that they should test the waters, seek an understanding before things escalated any further. The other faction, led by the more hawkish members, wanted immediate retaliation. There was no way to know for sure what the humans intended, and it seemed safer to act first, before they could grow stronger. While the Council bickered, the human warship remained poised at the edge of their known space, waiting without moving a single inch, a silent and menacing presence. It was clear to all who were watching that the ship was not acting out of aggression, but out of patience. It was a master of restraint, demonstrating an eerie confidence. Its silence spoke louder than any fleet of warships could. The Council's intelligence officers struggled to understand its technology, its movements, its intent. All they knew was that they were powerless against it. The more time passed, the more the Council's unease grew. Representatives began to demand answers. How could this happen? They asked. How could a race that had been pushed to the edge of galactic ignorance suddenly possess such power? Rumors began to swirl. Some suggested that humanity had discovered something ancient, a hidden power buried deep within their own history. Others thought that perhaps the human species had entered into an alliance with a hidden race, one far older and more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever known. But no one could say for certain. The reality was that no one had a clue how humans had done it, and that fact only deepened the mystery. Meanwhile, the human emissary was not idle. He sent a final message to the Council. "We have no desire to conquer your galaxy. We only ask for our place among you, a place where we are not to be underestimated or discarded. We have the power to shape this galaxy's future for the better, but we will not do so unless we are treated with the respect we now deserve." The words were simple, yet they struck a chord. The Council's leaders knew the humans had no intention of backing down, and their newfound power was no bluff. The emissary's message rang with clarity. Humanity would no longer be ignored, and they would not allow themselves to be brushed aside as they had been for centuries. The finality in the message left no room for negotiation. The humans had spoken, and they were demanding a seat at the table of galactic powers. Tensions within the Council reached their peak. Some were ready to meet the challenge head-on, while others, exhausted from years of internal strife, were ready to acknowledge the inevitable. Humanity was no longer the weak, insignificant species they had once thought them to be. They were a new force in the galaxy, and it was time the galaxy recognized it. But would the rest of the Council agree? Or would humanity's arrival be met with the full wrath of a galaxy that wasn't prepared to let go of its power so easily? The Council chambers were filled with tension as the representatives of the galaxy's greatest powers gathered once more. The question that had been plaguing them for days hung in the air like a storm cloud. How would they respond to humanity's audacious demand? There was no consensus. Some argued that humanity should be recognized immediately as an equal, while others called for swift and decisive action to neutralize what was now seen as an emerging threat. The Council's security teams were on high alert, and fleets were prepared for any move the human warship might make. But what unsettled everyone most was the warship's behavior. It was neither threatening nor aggressive. Instead, it had remained ominously silent, positioned just outside the Council's most fortified borders. It made no attempts to provoke, no attempts to engage. The warship simply waited, as if daring the Council to make the first move. It was as if the humans knew they had all the time in the galaxy, while the Council was racing against an unseen clock. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy was in jeopardy. The Council had been confident in its control for so long, but now, a species they had long ignored was shaking the very foundation of that power. There was no longer any pretending that humanity was insignificant, and the realization hit like a wave, drowning the Council's confidence. At the heart of the Council, a new voice began to rise above the bickering and the fear. It was the human emissary, the captain of the warship, who had requested a meeting with the Council's highest leaders. His message had already been delivered, but now it was time for something more direct. It was time to prove to the Council that humans were not to be trifled with. The emissary's request for an audience was reluctantly granted, but there was little hope among the Council's members that this meeting would be anything but another display of the humans' power. What they didn't expect was the calm yet unyielding presence of the human captain as he arrived at the Council chamber. When he spoke, his voice was low but carried a sense of unwavering authority. "I come not to threaten you," the captain said, his gaze sweeping across the room, "but to show you what you failed to see. For centuries, you have taken for granted the galaxy's power structure. But power is not measured by size, by age, or by the fleets you command. It is measured by the ability to rise above what is expected of you. And that is what humanity has done. We were once a forgotten species, discarded and overlooked. But we have learned, and we have grown." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected a demand for tribute, a threat of destruction. Instead, the emissary spoke as if he was offering them a partnership, a chance for the Council to evolve alongside humanity. But the underlying message was clear. If they refused, the humans would continue their path forward, with or without the galaxy's approval. The captain continued, "Your fleets, your weapons, they will never be enough. We have developed something far beyond anything you've seen before. I won't say we'll destroy you, because we don't need to, but you'll have a choice. Acknowledge humanity as an equal or face the reality that we will shape the future, with or without you." The silence that followed was deafening. The Council, accustomed to making decisions that affected the galaxy's future, found themselves paralyzed in the face of this new unknown force. How could they deal with a species that had quietly surpassed them, a species whose very presence was a challenge to everything they had ever believed about the galaxy's balance? And yet, as the emissary turned to leave, his final words cut through the silence. "You have seen the ship. You have felt its power. The next move is yours." With that, the human captain left the chamber, and the Council was left to reckon with the weight of his words. The galaxy's balance was on the edge of collapse, and humanity was the unknown variable. The next decision could change everything. Would the Council accept the humans, or would they risk the wrath of a species that had already demonstrated it could reshape the galaxy as it saw fit? The decision was not made easily. The Council's leadership was in disarray. The once unified body of representatives from across the galaxy had fractured, and tensions were at an all-time high. On one side, the more conservative members, led by the Andorians and the Orcs, demanded a show of strength, insisting that humanity's boldness must be met with immediate military force. "They are testing us," said an Andorian senator, his voice filled with disdain. "If we let this pass, we will be nothing but a laughingstock. The galaxy cannot afford weakness." On the other side, the more progressive members, including those from the Vorteni and the Litharians, began to question the wisdom of such a response. They argued that humanity's offer, an invitation to stand as equals, was not one to be dismissed lightly. The Vorteni representative, known for his sharp intellect, spoke up. "If we act out of fear and hostility, we risk plunging the galaxy into war. We have never seen a species like this. Perhaps it is time we recognized that humanity may have something to offer us beyond their military strength." The council chamber buzzed with heated debate, but amid the chaos, one truth became clear: the longer they delayed, the more the humans gained. The human warship was still out there, hovering just beyond the council's borders, waiting. It had not fired a single shot, not made any overt act of aggression. Yet it had already demonstrated its ability to dismantle fleets and cripple entire defense systems without ever engaging in direct combat. The humans were playing a different game, one the council was not prepared for. It was during this time of uncertainty that the unexpected happened. The assassination attempt on the human emissary was carried out. A covert faction within the council, made up of those who were fiercely opposed to humanity's rise, had planned to strike before the humans could get any more powerful. They dispatched a fleet to intercept the human captain as he traveled between council sectors. But the humans were ready. The attempt came at dusk, literally. The sky above the emissary's transport ship turned a deep crimson as the fleet launched its attack, their weapons charged and ready. But before a single shot could be fired, the human warship, which had remained hidden for weeks, emerged from the shadows of a nearby nebula. It moved with terrifying precision, a dark silhouette against the shimmering stars. The council's fleets attempted to form a perimeter, but it was too late. In the blink of an eye, the human ship disabled their engines with a series of laser bursts so precise it seemed almost surgical. Within seconds, the entire fleet was neutralized, and the humans hadn't lost a single ship. The council received a single communication: "We are not here to destroy. But those who try to destroy us will face the consequences. We only want peace." The message was clear. The humans were capable of overwhelming force, but they had chosen restraint. They had shown mercy. The assassination plot had failed not because the humans had been caught off guard, but because they had chosen not to escalate. The council was left to pick up the pieces of its shattered arrogance. The progressives were quick to push for a diplomatic resolution, urging the council to finally open formal talks with humanity. But the conservatives were not so easily swayed. They feared that if the humans were allowed to rise to prominence, the galaxy would be forever altered, and they would lose their place in the power structure. With the assassination attempt failing and humanity's power fully on display, the council faced a choice. They could continue their path of denial and resistance, or they could admit that the balance of power had changed. Humanity had arrived, and they had made it clear they were not going away. And if the galaxy's leaders did not act swiftly, they might soon find themselves with a new reality they could neither ignore nor control. The days that followed were filled with tense discussions, but as the threat of open conflict loomed ever closer, the council members began to understand that humanity was not a passing storm. They were a new force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The question now wasn't whether humanity would take their seat at the table. It was whether the council was ready to accept them, or if it would crumble under its own fear and pride. The decision to formally engage with humanity was not an easy one for the council. As the days passed, the political pressure mounted. On one hand, the progressives pushed for immediate talks, arguing that the galaxy's future depended on cooperation with the humans. On the other hand, the conservatives, fueled by fear and pride, insisted that the human rise was a challenge to everything the council stood for. They believed that recognizing humanity would weaken the existing power structures, giving rise to new factions that could not be controlled. The debate grew more heated as the council teetered on the edge of either a groundbreaking shift or catastrophic failure. In the quiet moments, when the debate quieted, some of the council's more diplomatic leaders tried to bring perspective. A Litharian diplomat, known for his calm demeanor and insight into galactic history, spoke out. "We cannot continue as though humanity is an anomaly to be squashed. We must recognize that the universe has a way of changing, and we cannot stand in the way of progress. To deny humanity is to deny the reality that the galaxy is evolving. The humans have shown restraint and patience. They have given us an opportunity to learn from them, to forge an alliance rather than a war." But the conservatives would not relent. They saw the Litharians' words as naive and dangerous. "You speak of evolution," one of the Andorians retorted, "but evolution isn't always peaceful. It's a battle for dominance. The humans will never be satisfied with peace. First, they demand recognition. Next, they will demand resources, territory, and influence. And then, it will be too late to stop them." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the chamber. But the voices of caution were growing stronger. Even the most hardened council members couldn't ignore the fact that the humans had demonstrated unparalleled restraint. The assassination attempt had been repelled, not through excessive violence, but with a show of calculated, overwhelming power. The human warship had demonstrated that it could wipe out fleets with ease, but had chosen to disable them instead. The humans, it seemed, were not driven by reckless ambition or a desire for domination. After days of deliberation, the council called for a vote that would determine the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy. The chamber was packed, with representatives from dozens of civilizations watching, each side hoping to sway the outcome. As the leaders cast their votes, the weight of the decision was apparent. Would they accept humanity as a new player, or would they attempt to neutralize the threat once and for all? As the final vote was tallied, the council was split. The progressives had narrowly won, but the conservatives had not given up. The vote in favor of opening talks with humanity passed, but the decision came with conditions. Humanity would have to prove their intentions before being granted full membership in the council. This was not a carte blanche invitation, but rather an opportunity for the humans to show their true purpose. The emissary, now aware of the council's decision, sent a final communication, one that would set the stage for what was to come. "We accept your offer," the message began. "But understand this, humanity's path is our own. We will not be constrained by the limits you have placed upon us. We seek cooperation, but we will never bow to your demands or limitations. We will stand as equals, or not at all. This is our final offer." The message sent ripples through the council. It was not an offer of compromise, but of mutual respect. The humans were laying their cards on the table, demanding the same recognition they had fought for, and making it clear that they would not settle for anything less. As the council digested the message, it became increasingly clear. Humanity was not a species that could be controlled or manipulated. They would not bend to the will of the established powers, and their rise was not just inevitable. It was a force that would shape the future of the galaxy, for better or worse. The Council could no longer pretend that humanity was a fleeting anomaly. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the heart of that change. The question was no longer whether the Council could accept them, but whether they could survive in this new reality that humanity was helping to forge. The Council's decision to open formal talks with humanity had set the galaxy on an irreversible course. The political and military ramifications rippled through every corner of galactic civilization. For years, the established powers of the galaxy had held sway, controlling resources, shaping alliances, and determining the course of history. Now, humanity had shattered that certainty. The very idea of cooperation with the humans was anathema to many, while others saw it as an opportunity for growth, for learning. But beneath the surface, there was a growing fear. Could humanity's rise really be trusted? Could a species so new, so untested, truly stand as an equal to the ancient and powerful galactic civilizations? In the days that followed the vote, representatives from the Council prepared to meet with the human emissaries on neutral ground, a space station located in the Outer Rim. It was chosen for its neutrality, far from the Council's homeworlds, and surrounded by the vast emptiness of uncharted space. It would be here that humanity's intentions would be fully revealed, and the future of galactic peace or war would be decided. The space station was bustling with activity as diplomats, military officials, and intelligence agents arrived from all corners of the galaxy. Security was tight, and every movement was watched with suspicion. No one could afford to underestimate the potential of the human delegation. They had already proven they were capable of the unimaginable, and now they had to face the Council face to face. As the emissary ship arrived in orbit, all eyes turned to the sleek vessel, a symbol of humanity's newfound power. It was a ship unlike any seen before, its design elegant yet intimidating. The humans had built their warship with the same efficiency and ingenuity they applied to every aspect of their existence, and the message it sent was clear. They were not here to beg for a seat at the table. They were here to claim their place. Inside the station, the Council representatives gathered in a massive hall, waiting for the human delegates to arrive. The air was thick with anticipation, and the silence was palpable. A mixed group of alien leaders took their seats: the proud, insectoid Tyrath, the fluid, ever-changing Litharians, the cold and calculating Quarkai, and a dozen other species, all united in a fragile alliance to make this moment work. When the humans entered, they did so without fanfare, their captain at the forefront. He wore no armor, no weapons, just the calm, measured demeanor of a man who had been through battles, both internal and external, and emerged victorious. The human emissary's eyes scanned the room, as though he was seeing not just the individuals in front of him, but the entire history of the galaxy that had brought them to this point. The Council leaders stared back, sizing up the humans. The room was tense, filled with suspicion, and barely contained hostility. But there was something else, an undercurrent of respect. It was undeniable. These humans, with all their audacity and confidence, had not come to plead for their place. They had come to demand it. "We are here," the human captain said, his voice carrying across the hall, "not to negotiate terms of surrender, but to discuss our future. Humanity has risen because we have learned, adapted, and forged our path. We are not like the others in this room. We do not bend to the expectations of the old powers, but we have no interest in domination. We simply seek our rightful place, as equals, in the future of this galaxy. The room fell into silence once again, but this time it was different. There was no immediate outrage, no calls for a swift rebuttal. Instead, the council members found themselves forced to confront a truth they had long avoided. Humanity was no longer a fledgling species. They were a force, self-made and capable, and the galaxy could not pretend that they didn't belong. The first to speak was a representative of the Hirath, their voice shaking with barely contained fury. "You have no right to demand anything. You are young, untested, and untrue," the human captain interrupted, his voice unwavering. "Our species may be young in your eyes, but we have built our power with our own hands. We've earned it, and if you want to keep your place in this galaxy, you must earn your right to stand beside us." The room erupted into a flurry of murmurs and gasps. The Xirath's representative faltered, unable to find a retort. There was no longer any denying the strength in humanity's words. They had made it clear. Respect was not given. It was earned. The rest of the meeting would be a careful dance of words and strategies. The council's decision-makers, though still divided, knew that humanity had forced their hand. No longer could they hold on to the illusion that they were in control. If they wanted to survive in this new order, they would have to learn how to work with this unpredictable, but undeniably powerful new species. But as the meeting continued, a sense of quiet realization spread throughout the room. Humanity was not just demanding a place at the table. They were changing the very shape of the table itself, and the council had no choice but to accept that. The meeting on the neutral station dragged on into the long hours of the galactic night, the council members still grappling with the reality that humanity was no longer a species they could ignore. The human emissaries' calm, unwavering demands had unsettled even the most seasoned diplomats. This was not the same species that had once been dismissed as insignificant. These humans had come to claim their place, and the galaxy had no choice but to face that fact. As the hours passed, the conversation shifted from posturing and accusations to a more measured dialogue. The human captain's words had made it clear that humanity sought cooperation, but on their own terms. The council members, who had once ruled with absolute certainty, now found themselves scrambling to negotiate with a species that demanded a new kind of respect, a respect that could not be bought or bartered with old tactics. One by one, the council representatives began to voice their thoughts, their concerns, their fears, but also their reluctant acknowledgement of the humans' undeniable strength. The Litharians were the first to speak openly. They had always been a species known for their wisdom and adaptability, and now, faced with the emergence of humanity as a new power, they were determined to understand them rather than fight against them. "We have long watched the stars," the Litharian leader said, "and seen the rise and fall of civilizations. We have observed the way of things, the ebb and flow of power. But there is something different about humanity. You have a fire, a drive, that none of us possess. Perhaps that is why you are destined for greatness. Perhaps that is why we must learn from you." The Xirath, still simmering with anger, narrowed their compound eyes and hissed in frustration. "Greatness. You speak of greatness like it is something noble. But power is not greatness. Power is control. And the humans will not stop until they control everything." The human captain's eyes locked with the Xirath representatives, his voice steady and calm. "We don't seek control. We seek freedom. The freedom to shape our future without being shackled by the expectations of an outdated system. If the galaxy cannot see that, then we will move forward on our own, as we always have." The Xirath leader's frustration boiled over, but he said nothing more. The words had struck a nerve, and deep down, the realization was settling in. Humanity was no longer a minor threat. They were an emerging force to be reckoned with. As the discussions continued, a new tension arose, not from hostility, but from the realization that this was a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were no longer willing to accept being relegated to the sidelines. They had fought for their place, and now the galaxy had no choice but to acknowledge them. At long last, the meeting drew to a close. The Council had agreed, in principle, to accept humanity as a full member of the galactic community, but with conditions. Humanity would not be granted carte blanche, but they would no longer be treated as outsiders. Instead, they would take their place alongside the other powers, with equal say in the future of the galaxy. The human captain stood, his expression resolute. "We will prove ourselves to you in time. We will work with you, not because we need to, but because we want to. But make no mistake, this is not a favor we ask. It is our right." With that, he turned to leave the chamber, his words hanging in the air long after he was gone. The Council was left in stunned silence. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer a race to be ignored. They were a power in their own right, a force that would shape the future of the galaxy. Outside, the human warship remained in orbit, waiting, silent, patient, and ready. It was a symbol of what humanity had become, a new player on the galactic stage, unbowed and unstoppable. As the Council members filed out of the meeting hall, they could no longer deny it. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had forced the rest of them to change with it. Whether the galaxy was ready or not, humanity's rise was the dawn of a new era, one that would be defined not by the dominance of the old powers, but by the ingenuity, resilience, and relentless spirit of a species that had once been forgotten, but had now claimed its rightful place among the stars.